Debra's Workout is the 8th episode of the 4th season of Everybody Loves Raymond. This is directed by Mackenzie, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. It's a really good episode. It's not necessarily one of my favourites, but we do have some really good moments. It starts off with Debra coming home from a workout. Ray is just about to go out golfing with the guys, and she gives him a very suggestive kiss. And Ray basically looks back and forth between Debra and the bag of golf clubs, and Debra and the golf clubs. And I think it's fair to say that it's not really a surprise when he decided to choose having sex with Debra over going golfing with the guys. He's then down at Nemo's, and the guys are there, and he tells them that this is the 3rd time this week he's had sex with Debra. Probably didn't need to add with Debra there. And they start to give some suggestions for why this might be. And somebody suggests that maybe it's because Debra doesn't want him to go golfing. Honestly, I feel like that's a stretch. I feel like that would be not at all an option, but Ray is thinking that this could be the case, and he's just about to ask Debra, while she's cleaning her teeth and getting ready for bed, if that's why she's been, or at least she did that morning, encourage sex to stop him from going golfing. And just as he's about to ask her that, she kisses him very suggestively again. And then she also tells him maybe that you should go golfing tomorrow because she felt bad that he got to miss golfing with the guys, clearly suggesting actually that's not what's going on here. And they're about to have sex again. And Ray then finds a flyer. And it's a flyer with a very muscly, attractive man on the front. And it turns out that this is Debra's new aerobics instructor. And suddenly Ray begins to realise that Debra seems to be a lot more in the mood after she's come home from an aerobics class, and he begins to think, well, actually, maybe it's because this guy is turning her on, and suddenly he doesn't want to do it anymore. The next day, he's then over at Marie and Frank's. Robert is there, and he tells Robert his concern. Frank and Marie are then in the room. Frank suggests Debra's after some new jewellery. Marie suggests that maybe she's trying to compensate because she can't cook, which is also a ridiculous suggestion. And he then shows them the flyer. Well, Robert shows them the flyer as Ray had already showed him it. And Frank said something that I thought was actually very well written. It's a beautiful, well, maybe beautiful is not the right word. It's a really great line. But I don't have any thoughts on this, and I'd love to know if anybody has any opinions. But he says, who cares where she gets her appetite as long as she has her meal at home? And I have to say, that was almost poetic. There was something about that I rather liked. And the next thing we know, and I absolutely love this scene, Ray is down at the class. He goes to the aerobics class, and they're doing step aerobics, and Ray starts to join in. And obviously, conveniently, there was a spare step beside Debra, and he's basically flailing around. Everybody else is following along. I have to say, it made me want to get up and go. It made me feel really energetic, really enthusiastic to do some step aerobics. I'm not a huge fan of step aerobics, largely because I'm constantly, whenever I do step aerobics, I feel like I'm going to trip over the step. And, well, actually, it kind of happens to Ray. He's flailing around, he's not really following along, and then he falls flat onto the boombox, and the music just stops, and it's very dramatic, it's very funny, really thoroughly enjoyed that scene. Debra and Ray then go home after the failed class, and Debra's not in the mood. And Ray shows her the flyer, and he confronts her and basically says, this is why you've been coming home all turned on and hungry for sex, because of this instructor. And I like the fact that Debra didn't overreact. Sometimes Debra will overreact to a situation. This isn't one of those times, and Ray clearly was bothered by this to the point where he shoved the flyer in the trash and then kicked the trash, and it went everywhere, and he was clearly really annoyed by this. Is he allowed to be annoyed by this? Not necessarily, because that would suggest that Debra's not allowed to be around attractive men. And that's not an acceptable thing in a relationship, because she's not doing anything wrong, of course. But at the same time, I like the fact that Ray was able to show that this was really bothering him, even though he showed it by kicking a trash can. But nevertheless, I like the fact that those emotions finally came out. And Debra does then explain to Ray that the reason that she's felt like this is not because she's been looking at an attractive man during an aerobics class. It's because those classes make her feel good about herself. They make her feel good about other parts of herself. And that makes her feel more attractive and more sexy. And that works really well. And I think that was a very realistic way to conclude the narrative and to give a valid explanation. I think it made a lot of sense. And Ray was certainly happy with that answer as well. And then they decide to go upstairs and make up. And we end with an aerobics class again. And this time, Ray actually came down to deliver a new boombox after he flattened the last one. And it turns out it's a female aerobics instructor instead this time. And, well, Ray's quite happy to stay for this class. It's a decent episode. It's definitely not one of my all-time favourites. It's maybe not the funniest, but I think it's very thought-provoking. It raises some interesting points and some interesting discussions. Personal highlights would have to be, well, Frank's line about getting her appetite at one place and having her meal at home. I don't know why, there's just something about that I rather liked. And absolutely the highlight for me is Ray at the aerobics class. I don't agree with him going down there. He was going to pick up Debra, but he arrived 45 minutes early. And I don't agree with him doing that. But the fact that we had a lot of fun there, and Ray just flailing around and falling all over. And the class energized me. It really made me want to get up and move around instead of just sitting on my butt and watching sitcoms all day. So definitely a really solid episode in that regard. Not the funniest, but that being said, I still really enjoyed it. Debra's workout is definitely a pretty decent episode of Everybody Loves Raymond.